very much, Abel, and welcome to the first session of Car Design Dialogues Asia. Now, before we get started, just a quick reminder, as Abel said there, we've got a really great networking platform called Grip, which we'd love you to take part in and try. There's plenty of interesting people there to meet. But aside from that, on with the show. So the first session is called Interior Futures, and it's about the rapid acceleration of technological development, which continues to transform car design. At the sharp end of this is the car interior. Smart surfaces, screens, sustainable materials, autonomous vehicles, and ideas about luxury all figure in a conversation that's evolving rapidly. And here to discuss what shape the interior will take in the very near future are Martin Ulrich, Global Design Head of Tata Motors, Alexander Dreyer, Lead Creation Center Asia Pacific for BASF Performance Materials, and Gustavo Guerra, Design Director at Volvo Trucks, although I think maybe actually now VP of Strategic Product Planning at Volvo's R&D Group. I know you've just changed roles quite recently, Gustavo, but I'm not sure if it's quite kicked in yet. But welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Martin, I might start with you, if that's all right. We had a really compelling presentation for Tata of the Sierra vehicle, actually, previous car design dialogues. And I know in the past you described it as a manifesto, an interior design manifesto. And I wondered if you'd explain a little bit about what that manifesto actually says and how do you see it evolving the interior design language for Tata?
Yeah, thanks, James. I mean, as we presented in the video, the little video we did a couple of months back with the Sierra concept, for us, during its development and ultimately, the whole presentation, it was very much a manifesto. We slowly developed a set of ideas, and we realized that actually it's very much in sync with social trends and demographic trends that are happening in terms of how people value an automotive interior. I mean, having worked on interiors for quite a few years, I've seen a real sort of evolution. Now there's a real shift, I think, in terms of what customers expect an automotive interior needs to be. And I think it's going to go beyond the sort of very traditional sort of car design vocabulary. And it's being influenced very much by interior design in a broader scheme in terms of creating a sanctuary, an ambience, atmosphere. And technology is a huge driver and an enabler in achieving that.
Screens, actually staying with the idea of technology, screens have been a particularly interesting issue ever since Tesla sort of jammed an enormous one in their early models. I wondered where Tata see that evolving, because there are some that are slightly skeptical of putting everything behind the sort of the black mirror and retaining some kind of traditional controls, I suppose.
Yeah, I think with the Sierra concept, we definitely made a statement by not having any screens. I mean, we've seen this sort of proliferation of screen technology, as a way to interface with infotainment information, driver information, and so forth. And we've seen that accelerate to the point where, it's like, how big are the screens? How broad are they? How many are they? And all that. And when we were developing the Sierra, it was in many ways a tribute to the original car, which was done in the 80s, where obviously there was no screen technology. And when we looked at the memories that people had of that vehicle, everybody remarked on the large DLO, and most of the customers were children back then who were sort of experiencing holidays, going to see parents, going to see family members, holidays, this sort of thing. And so like probably all of us here, when we used to travel in a vehicle, you used to stare out the window for hours on end, and you witnessed the landscape. So that was kind of the story that we were looking at, and we realized actually we stare at screens way too much nowadays as a society, and especially from our children's point of view. So we said maybe it's actually something that the people who will enjoy and interface with this vehicle actually interface with each other rather than a screen. And the kids are watching a movie with headphones on, and the parents are listening to their own music, and this sort of thing. So we made a conscious effort with the concept to take the screens out of the IP completely, and that everything was voice activated. And there is a sort of tech shelf where you can put a phone, or you can put an iPad or something. So it's a little bit customizable as a sort of unit. if you do want to have that screen. But ultimately, the foundation was, to get away from that. And to be honest, of all the things, other than the sort of nostalgia that the car brought from an Indian market perspective, the fact that we took the screens out, that was the biggest thing that resonated when we unveiled it, among the design community and the public at large.
Gustavo, does that approach resonate with you? How did Volvo approach the screen thing? I didn't mean this to go straight into screens, but we have, so let's just get in there, shall we?
No, I think it's a topic that everybody discussing and analyzing, trying to analyze from a philosophical point of view. And Volvo as a brand, we have always been very human-centric focused. And this is very much what Martin is pointing out in here. What is really the interaction pattern and the logic that customers will be looking for? How do they really perceive this, not only from a technological point of view? And if we take our products as a reference, they are heavy duty products, right? They are tools, they are equipment for usage in construction equipment, heavy transportation, and so in there you also have to consider what is the efficient approach for it from a bottom line point of view for our customers. Is not only to provide the visual appealing or intuitive navigation, but it's at a certain point in an emergency situation when you're driving a 60-ton truck. Do you want to have a physical button in there that you want to push, or do you actually want to go through a couple of screens to find? Yes. Those are very valid questions, right? And if anything, I think the paradigm change that happened, as you mentioned in there with Tesla, with when they introduced the larger screen, is that at least that has demystified the fact of using touch screens in heavy duty vehicles. And I think that is positive, because until then there was a big resistance on actually doing it. But the fact is that not every application, especially on a truck, is suitable to be run through a screen. So the big dilemma now is to actually segment that in a good way from a usability point of view, on what makes sense to be on a screen and what makes sense to be on a control. And we will not enter a screen size war like you have seen the digital cameras in the past. Was a megapixel war, right? Oh, I have 6, I have 6.2. We're not going to be discussing the inches of the screen here, but it's really how do we prepare the usability to make more sense for the application.
Mm-hmm. That sort of arms race in terms of pixels or size of screens, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's difficult to find a clear winner. You don't ever sort of win. You get trapped in a kind of a sort of ever-ending sort of spiral, I suppose. Alexandra, you're coming at the interior from a different perspective, obviously from the material side of things. And I wondered, I mean, the key word, we've just done a huge report actually on interior design trends, which will shortly be launched. But of course, the thread that ran through the whole thing was sustainability. And I wondered what you're hearing from sort of interior car designers in terms of materials. What do they want from companies like yours?
Yeah, I mean, overall, like you said, the word sustainability looms very large, and I mean, it is arguably one of the most important challenges, right, that faces the world. And I think our CEO at BASF has also made it clear it's really the most important topic for BASF as a whole. So we look at the sustainability topic through in sort of 2 steps. One is carbon, right? Sort of basically decarbonizing both the production of materials, but also the actual carbon footprint of materials. So this is the one side we look at, and then the other side is actually more leading to your question, James, is avoiding plastic waste, and therefore also working with designers, which is what I do, interior designers, to design for circularity. And that is a very big topic at the moment. We do a lot of workshops. the way we approach it is to sort of start from the top and try to first distinguish between two things, which is not commonly understood. So designers play a really big role in this process because they're at the beginning of the product life cycle. And we actually start by doing workshops and trying to educate them that there is design for circularity, and then there is design from the circular aspect. So basically, it's looking at how do you design something at the beginning of the life cycle? How do you use bio-based materials? How do you use, let's say, recycled content? How within your actual design strategy can you already design something that is actually then more likely, let's say, to be separated, disassembled, and then recycled at the end? So this actually goes through the entire philosophy of what we do at the moment, and it's actually a fascinating topic. From using single material components, from using special coatings or no coatings at all, how to separate materials, how you design something so that it can actually be torn apart again at the end of life. It's a very large topic, and we are spending significant time at the moment also adjusting our materials to this demand from designers.
And one of the things that's keeps coming to the fore in conversations I'm having is the sheer speed of change at the moment in the industry. We're at a kind of pivotal moment, I suppose. We've had a similar kind of idea of what a car should be for the last, well, it was the 20th century's kind of greatest industrial sort of invention, I suppose. But everything is changing now. Technology, EVs, autonomous vehicles. What do you see are the biggest opportunities, Alexandra? And this is a question for all of you guys, actually, but maybe you could start with you, Alexandra. What do you see the biggest opportunities on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, I can only try to answer it from our own perspective. So from the material side and at BASF, I mean, you're right. The speed of this change has been tremendous. Not too long ago, it's like only a few years ago, primarily our customers were interested in the performance of a material, and let's say maybe we talked about lightweight materials or materials that could replace steel or something to make it. But can it be recycled? Can it be mechanically recycled, chemically recycled? How much bio-based content do you have? Is this material actually partly made from recycled? So actually answering these questions and having materials that can answer that is actually the most important thing. I know we work, for example, with Volvo Group in actually doing exactly that, in building, providing materials so that components can have a really, really high grade of recycled content inside. So Gustavo, we are our respective groups are actually working together on this, and this is great to see when supply and demand really is pulling on the same string, how fast change can happen.
Martin.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the developments, as you said, we've got electrification, connectivity, autonomy, and these big themes happening. But I think another thing, the rapid development of technology and the fact that the customers are much more sophisticated than they were a generation ago. They're much more attuned to, various trends, whether they're social trends. We were talking about sustainability and, the moral compass that creates, from a customer value system, but also just in terms of technology. If you see, the amount of gadgets, you see the amount of, the way we interface with products in our homes, consumer products and all that overlap is just educating, customers to a much higher fidelity than was, a generation. So their expectations from, our product, which is an automotive product, are much higher than I think they were, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Gustavo, you've worked all over the world in various different markets. Is that a sort of a thing that you recognize, a point of view that you recognize?
Yeah, I think going back to the core of the question there with the speed of change, I would actually connect to what Martin just said in here. I would challenge that the speed of change is not that different, actually. our industry is constantly changing, and there is always a push. I think the point in here now is actually the criteria for the change, is that people are being tuned to different concepts and different needs based on how our society is evolving. And talking about sustainability that Alexander touched base in there before, I would guess that Alexander has a lot of demands in the past from a technical and functionality point of view, and the pressure was just about the same. It's just that the criteria now is different, and it coincides, and I think that's the big trigger. It coincides with a paradigm shift in technology as a whole when we put the automation, sustainability, and e-mobility all together, and that actually creates the base for us to do a bigger leap. But that only really takes place, if you ask me, when society is ready. And I would say now, when you look in Europe, when you look in North America, the basis for that, the pull from the marketplace is actually there. And then I think that's when we create all the basis to actually do the change. I think the big question is, will that change happen homogeneously across the world, or will follow different steps, depends on the regions, depending on local needs and acceptance? I think that's the big key. It's the paradigm shift that we are in, and how do we as a society take that on?
Thanks, Gustavo. In terms of technology and moving away from the idea of screens, what about, could you tell me a little bit about the idea of smart surfaces and how what role they may well play in the shaping the interior design of both trucks and cars?
Should we start with trucks?
You could start with trucks, absolutely.
Now, I think this is a technology that is really flexible and allow us to really design our interiors in a different way. It has not been really used in the trucking industry yet, but I think the big benefit that will bring is it's more adaptability of the platforms. I think comparing to cars, trucks are products with much longer life cycle. The payback on the investment on a truck, of course, depends a lot of its efficiency, and we have a tendency to have platforms, interior platforms, that are very locked in for many years because of all the requirements that we have in this area. So having these technologies like touch in surface may allow us to do update more from a software side than a hardware side, and give us the opportunity to give more flexibility to the customers down the line. I think this is definitely something that we're working heavily on, but it has not materialized in the marketplace by any OEM yet, and I really look forward to that becoming more of a standard.
Martin, I might move to you next, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, Tata Motors, does commercial vehicle as well as passenger vehicles, and like Gustavo says, commercial vehicles have a longer life cycle, in terms of their cycle plan, in terms of their product development, and also their shelf life. But these sort of technologies like smart surfaces need to be considered, in the life cycle of the product. And of course, the other thing is the commercial aspect in terms of just the cost of bringing that sort of technology. Passenger vehicles are much more attuned to that because the customer, it's a quicker cycle. That's the first thing, and also the customer is much more attuned, I think, in terms of a technology trend. But ultimately, does the technology actually achieve what it's supposed to do? It shouldn't be seen as a gimmick. It should be seen as something that will ultimately solve a problem and enhance the experience. In terms of getting A to B, interfacing with the information you need, and so forth. So it needs to be balanced, that it's more than just a marketing tool, like you have it in a 5-second clip on an ad, and it's a sort of feature. It's got to actually be part of the design vocabulary, that it's actually making a contribution to the product. More than that. That's ultimately what it needs to be.
Alexandra, would you like to weigh in on the idea of smart surfaces?
Yeah, we have done a lot of work. I've actually myself personally done a lot of work on smart services in the last few years, and I think this is one of the areas where possibly technology has sort of outstripped the speed of technology has sort of outstripped what actually the ability of people to imagine what to do with it, and also on consumers' behavior of what to expect. I still remember it's not too long ago when in any interior you would basically have a panel. Something could be either a panel, could be a button, or could be a light, and you could do various games with trying to design around that. But nowadays, the way I look at it, we really have materials now which at the same time can be structural. A structural panel can actually have a sensor embedded in them and can maybe even do some ambient lighting all at the same time. And it becomes quite challenging, actually. This extreme freedom almost becomes challenging to even know what to do with. And sometimes I think in this case it has developed so fast that I think even in the consumer's mind, they don't know quite what to expect. But the important thing is that at the end, it should all be serve a purpose that helps the user of the car somehow interface with it in a natural way. And I think that's where this is evolving towards right now.
I've chatting to another designer the other day. He was talking about the future of the interior designer and how you need to become experienced designers. Martin, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think interior design used to be a very sort of cerebral exercise where you had to consider ergonomics and material and product design and furniture design and these sort of things, and it was all of these variables coming together to create a product, but it was still very much mired in an automotive world. But now user interface, as we spoke about screens, is a key part of how you interface with an interior, but now even more is a sort of emotional ambience atmosphere that you're creating. And actually, you want to make the message as simple as possible and the experience as simple as possible. So I think actually interior design is becoming experience design in the sense that, it's how you actually experience the product, that voyage from A to B, the space where you interface with other people, how you interface with the product and all of that. That's fundamentally the underline now I see in interior design. It's very much evolved into this I would say, a very broad palette.
And on that note, are interior designers having to sort of recalibrate, their skill set, or are they equipped to sort of enter this new world of experiential design?
I think that's happening now naturally. I think a lot of interior designers, especially like managers, chiefs, directors, and so forth, have already had one foot in the UX UI field. Even though that's becoming a very dedicated, that is a specific skill set. But traditionally it was, sort of working, in that. But also interior designers had a stronger connection with CMF traditionally, I think, than exterior design. And so they've already had that sensitivity, to these areas that are now becoming even more important. And like I said, it's all about how it comes together homogeneously.
Gustavo, your thoughts? I would like to think that interior designers or designers in the automotive helm as a whole has always been experienced designers. If you think about it, in the end of the day, it's about the message that comes across, and it's about the feeling that you have when interacting with a vehicle. But either just by looking at its exterior or by living inside a cab on a driving or on a bunk bed in the back of your truck. So I would like to think that this notion has always been there, but it's the terminology that may be changing a little bit, and in a way that by all means is positive, because it elevates design from purely styling to a more holistic activity, which I would like to think again that we have always done. It's just that now it's becoming more obvious that the complexity is so high that designers play such a big role in packaging that in the right way.
And you mentioned there bunk beds, which it put me on mind of this idea of the car interior as being a bit more like a living space. Even Robin Page has spoken very eloquently about this idea of creating a Scandi living room. And I suppose, trucks would be a natural space for that to be experimented with, given the nature of them, of the users they serve. And I wondered if there were kind of lessons or crossovers between the world of interior design of trucks and the interior design of cars.
I think the experience, the learning to take from there is that the interior of a truck has always been divided into two very distinct areas. It's the driving environment, so that's your office, and there is the living environment, and that's your home, right? And there has been attempts in the past to relook at it from a perspective of integrating more. Don't make that division. Make the living and the driving more symbiotic, and you go between one and the other. But the reality is that's not how the product is used. You spend 10, 12 hours a day in your office. You actually want to leave your office and get home and relax. So that actual division in there is really important. And customers recognize that. It's a matter of creating a peace of mind, a relaxing mode for them to be able to go back to the office early in the morning, right? So I think the learning there for car designers, I would say, is really investigate how the vehicle will be used in this new era. If we're talking about automation and you don't need to sit in there and hold the steering wheel and drive in the traditional sense, is there a logic to create a living room? Or will they not want to be in a living room because they still feel the need of being controlled? I don't know. But the fact is that it's not a matter of just playing with the opportunities that are given now. Try to understand how the customers will use it, because that makes a difference.
Yeah, that's good. The only thing I'd add there is that we used to go to offices, Gustavo. Maybe we will again, but I've forgotten what my one looks like. We're sort of running a little bit short of time, so I'm just going to ask you a final question to each of you, and that is to make a prediction. I know this is always dicing with death, but a prediction for how the future of the interior might evolve. I'll start with you, Martin, then perhaps you, Gustavo, and then we'll round up with Alexandra, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think as we spoke, what you said, Gustavo, was we've always had that experience design mindset, but now it's obviously now the overview, and it's also the label now that's being used to encompass the work. If I see how we go forward, I mean, it's going to be driven. Design is always driven by technology. So ultimately, if I think about where we're going to go, you have to just look at where technology is going to be taking us in the next 10 years. And I think the big two factors are going to be autonomy and then eventually AI, in terms of taking away actually the in many ways the singular kind of engagement of driving a vehicle, and it'll be actually just spending time in a vehicle. That will be the thing which will change the way we look at interior design fundamentally.
Wonderful. Thanks, Martin. Gustavo, your turn.
Yeah, and I will throw in there, in addition to what Martin said, which is very relevant, but I would also throw in there for designers at large to think about business models. And maybe I'm a little bit too much into my new role in here as on the strategic product planning, but the fact is that we have been very much driven by technology since the marketplace has been very stable. This is how you create a business case on buying a car or a truck. This is how much you use it, and then you resell it, and off you go. Now that we're entering automation and we're entering electromobility, which creates different numbers, right? The purchase of a vehicle becomes a lot more expensive. The life cycle becomes different. Depending on the business models of acquisition of these vehicles, if it's a leasing, if it's a vehicle as a service, or whatever it is, the criteria will change again. And when those criteria change, we need to design for that. Let's assume that autonomous vehicles are all over the place and they're accessible from the touch of your button. How much do you actually need to cater for a specific customer to buy that vehicle, or how much you need to cater for a fleet manager that actually have to purchase that fleet for their business? So I think that will be the big change for designers in here, that we not only wait for the business models to be reevaluated, redesigned, but also support driving there in a way that makes sense for society.
Wonderful, thanks. And final word to you, Alexandra.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it short. I think Martin said that at the end, the interiors evolve with the available technology. I think that resonates with me very much. I think on top of that, I would just like to add, I think that some of these technologies will actually make new use cases possible. So together with the electrification and the autonomous driving, etc., suddenly, and let's say add smart surfaces to it and maybe another thing or two, suddenly the car interior will actually offer itself for use cases that previously were not there. So who says that in 5 years' time we can't have this car design dialogue from the back of a car, or you can't have a group meeting, a video conference from the back of a car, or do things that are, let's say, hitherto unusual. And I think that will evolve with the technology as well.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Alexandra, for your thoughts. And that's, I'm afraid, all we have time for. There was lots of other things to unpack in this conversation, but for now, we're going to have to leave it there. So my thanks indeed to Martin, Gustavo, and Alexandra for joining us at Car Design Dialogues. We hope you stick around for more sessions, which will be coming your way throughout the day. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.